Hello, Scott. Can you hear us now?
Yeah, now I can
All
hear you.
right. Scott Copley, present. Scott Guthrie,
Here.
Jim Humphrey,
Here.
Brad Mayer, absent. Ben Para,
Here.
Sarah Repose,
Here.
Mike Stevens, not present. Ted Tracy.
Here. We have a quorum.
We, for emergency evacuation procedures, proceed out the door to the back.
Okay, next on the agenda is the approval of minutes from February 29th. Did everybody get a copy in the email?
Yes,
And are there any corrections?
move that we accept them as printed.
Motion
Second.
is made and seconded to accept them as printed. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So voted. So now we're going to go to old business, which is further discussion regarding elections, terms, party affiliation, and ballots. There were some questions about vacancies in office that most of us had and are trying to address. And I had asked Chairperson Patno if she would join us to help in the discussion, because Ted had a few different ideas, and we're just trying to get some idea on what to do. So Kathy, are you with us?
I see her microphone is muted. Oh, there she is.
I am here, but I don't have a camera, if that's okay. Can you hear me?
That's
Yeah.
fine. Yep, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Great picture, though.
Oh. Thanks.
So we've been discussing vacancies in office, and they're plentiful. We've been discussing 4-year town council terms, which has caused, I think, 4 vacancies in office since it was enacted. And Ted had a few questions about if we could change the way to have a special election interact with the next general election, right?
Correct.
So why don't you ask Kathy what your thoughts are?
As it's written right now, it only allows for an appointment if the vacancy occurs within 12 months before the term is supposed to end, the election that would cause that to replace it. One of the ideas is we're considering is if it's within 12 months of the next general election. So as if it were the exact same circumstances we have right now with District 1, the town council could appoint someone that would basically fill out till November, then have a special election for the remainder of the term for 2 years from that point.
And that's due to cost, right?
Correct.
Cost
And time
and-
for represent, like right
cost,
now,
time and ease of
Yeah.
doing it. Do you have any input and any history of what's going on, Kathy? And I know that we've had a few, I think 2 school committee people, I think, left at one point, and there were appointments. One was Nancy when she passed away. The other nearest one is,
Leanne,
oh,
something.
well, yeah, well,
Leanne Russell, Leanne Russell, she resigned.
she was, the
And,
one that- she was the one that didn't make a whole lot of meetings, right?
right, she was living out of state in Texas.
She was a school committee member here and she was living in Texas.
Yeah,
Yeah, but she said she was gonna come home, and she would try to come home, but then she was missing meetings, and so at the time, we didn't have any Zoom abilities, and of course, open meetings you're not supposed to anyway,
Yeah.
except because of this emergency, so I can't remember 100%, but I think we finally I called the question on her. She said, oh, I'm gonna be home next weekend, and I'll be there, and then she just, I told her, I said, it's just not, palatable. I think you need to resign. So she did. And I believe was it Frank Hyde that was appointed? I think?
correct. That was Frank. That
It
was
was
after
Frank
me.
Hyde. Yeah. Yeah.
Kathy, Ben Para, I'm here. I didn't know. if
I
you-
know. I see ya. I
All
see
right.
ya.
Yeah,
I recognize your voice too.
I got Nancy's seat when she moved.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Wasn't that,
She moved
But
to District 4.
yeah, she moved out of the district. She
But I
moved-
thought she finished, she was able to finish her term. And then, or were you appointed?
I was appointed till the
Or
next,
did you run? You didn't run for the rest, or you were?
I
appointed?
ran after that in
Oh,
one.
okay. All right. All right. I couldn't remember. I know she did move out of district by accident, actually. She
Yeah,
thought her new street was in the same district, but it wasn't.
All right, so that forced another election for District 3. or an
I-
appointment or an appointment.
I think there was an appointment and then you
And
just
that's
ran
where-
again, right, Ben? You ran at the next election?
Yes, and Nancy ran in District 4 where she moved to and won.
Exactly, and she won, right, I remember that. Because Murray Toppin decided not to run.
Okay,
She
So that-
she would have run instead, but she decided not to oppose Nancy, and so she didn't run.
okay.
But there was another one too, Donna Hayden. Do you remember Donna
Oh, yes,
Hayden?
yes, I remember that.
And when she left, she was appointed by the count. I think Mike Reeves got her seat, or was it Lisa Tomaso? I couldn't remember. It's either one of those. I think Mike came back as an appointment at one point too.
Yeah,
So-
and then they had a special and Judy Lina won that one, is that?
Right.
I believe so, yeah.
This,
Yeah.
the 4-year terms on in government positions are kind of like hard to deal with, and
Yeah.
and
no,
and they're pretty expensive. That's why, we were discussing bringing the council terms back to 2 years, because it's just nobody can commit. And I'm
Yeah,
surprised,
it's a tough commitment.
I'm surprised that so many people can commit to the school committee. We're gonna find out probably in a few weeks if we can
Yep.
get a commitment from someone from District 1. I don't know if you've heard anything, but I'm pretty worried about it.
I haven't heard anything. There was a gentleman that reached out to me yesterday. I didn't recognize his name and he wanted information about a run to District 1, and I told him to please contact the Board of Canvassers,
Yeah.
Laurie Anderson, and find out the deadlines and everything. And so he just wrote back and said, oh, thank you. He thought for some reason that the school committee was in charge of it. I mean, that's the ignorance out there from our public. They don't realize that it's an elected position, that it's not appointed, and that you have to go through this whole series of, not only putting your nomination papers in, your declaration, your nomination papers, the whole 9 yards. So I don't know if he will in fact contact the Board of Canvassers, but that's where I sent him. So, and I have another person, I'm not going to mention their name, but the indication was that if nobody else came forward, like on the first day of declaration, because it's a 2-day thing, I believe, they might put their name in. But they wanted to see if someone else was interested. And on this one, it's only a 2-year commitment, because or is it almost 3? I guess,
Yeah, 2.5 years.
It's,
2.5, yeah. But you're right about the 4, but we've never not been able to field a school committee position, but I'm not sure, if that'll continue in a regular general election. But it makes sense to me that instead of doing special elections, because so much time is left or whatever before the next election, it doesn't make sense to me. Just wait till the next general election. They're every 2 years. So why would you, worry too much about it and try to do a special election? That's kind of how I feel, but.
Kathy, would you prefer that we, no matter when the vacancy occurs, have the ability to appoint to the next general election, or put a time cutoff? Like, let's say person is reelected in November and the next January, like 2 months later, they say, oh, something happened, I got to quit. And now we have another 1.5 years until the next general election. Would you like to be able to appoint then for 1.5 years and then elected for 2 years, or a special election at that point?
I don't think that the timing matters. I think you just should wait. I mean, if it's really about saving the town money on a special election, just appoint. Doesn't matter, even if it's almost 2 years out to the next election. I think that makes more sense. There may be some people that will think that it's a political appointment, and even though they're nonpartisan as of right now, they may feel, oh, that person has a leg up or whatever. But one thing's for sure, if a person is appointed and they get a look at what it feels like to be on school committee, they may not choose to run in the next election, and you'll just have to field more candidates. But it's, having to do close to 2 years before the next election, I don't think is, that's my opinion. I can't speak for the citizens of Coventry, but I think that you could make a case that, hey, we're going to just save you money just by appointing someone. And I think there's probably less, if it stays nonpartisan, especially, and it's not a political issue, I think you'll get less complaints. I think most people don't even realize what's happening. They don't even know. I've been on school committee close to 20 years, and half the people in my neighborhood don't even know what I do. you know? So, and every time I go around and ask for nomination signatures, you know, they go, we have a school committee in town. What do you do? And why would you do that? And I say, yeah, you're right. I don't know what to do.
But to your point, your question is, if there's not a special election, somebody's appointed, they could be appointed for as
Yeah.
long as 23 months,
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, that was just,
which is a pretty long appointment.
The other problem that we're dealing with, Kathy, is the state law says that the term has to be 4 years. So what we've
Oh, for
been,
school committee, yeah, so you have to
Yes.
stay with the 4.
right, so, you know, historically, what's happening is seats are being vacated. Maybe not so much for the 4 years on the school committee as they are on the council, but we might have to get a ruling or an opinion on, you know, trying to change something on the local level that is required on the state level. I don't know if that's something that we should consider. Maybe if we do get a legal counsel on our commission in the next week or two, we can pose that question, but it just seems that lack of participation and I won't call it ignorance, like you said, I would call it folks that aren't educated and don't understand how government runs, how school committees runs. And it's frustrating when we can't get someone to run for office and either commit or you know, put their heart and soul into it. So
Right. Yeah, I mean, for the past 20 years, we haven't really had that problem on school committee. But I have heard it from town council people now that like on one term, that's all I can do. I could go back and look to see what you know, how many people ran a second time in school committee. There have been a couple occasions, I think. And then, of course, you know, old timers like me just, you know, kept running or whatever. There have been people, you know, that have, you know, done the 8 years, obviously, and then decided, okay, I'm done. I mean, that's going to happen this year, I think, with Donna Kalunian. I'm not running again. And word on the street is that James Pearson probably won't run again, but, you know, I don't know if that's 100% true yet. So there, you know, Donna did 8 years. James will have finished 8 years. Obviously, the newer generation, you probably are correct in that the newest, youngest people may say that's just way too much. One term, you know, even 4 years might be too much. I can't speak to that. I really don't know what the interest is out there on school committee seats, but we have been able to round up people. We've never had, I mean, obviously we haven't had contested races, but I've always had a contested race except for the very last race, my last 4 years. So in District 2, there seems to be a bunch of people that are interested in running for school committee in the past anyway, and have actually opposed me. But I know James, I think, had 2 races without, I think both of his races were uncontested. Donna last time was uncontested. So I don't know, you know, that's a difficult one. I'm not sure. I don't know how the public will feel about, you know, just doing a special, you know, needing a special election, but, you know, that's for you to kind of hash out, I guess. I mean, I think probably lots of people have different opinions.
And because there could be there's a reality, but there could be a public perception with a lot of appointees for long periods of time. You know, too, if you think it's kind of future-proof, I'm always thinking of future-proofing the document. All it takes is a hot button issue and everybody's running for school committee.
Oh, yeah.
A new high school
Yep.
curriculum.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it could happen. We've seen it country nationwide. All of a sudden, people are now running for school committee. So, I mean, right now,
We're on the
there's
other end, but-
disinterest and it's time and effort to do that.
Yeah, they've taken out across the country, a lot of school board members who were longstanding have literally had, you know, opposition and, you know, the grassroots power. A lot of people are being, you know, encouraged to run because they don't agree with, you know, CRT or what's happened during the pandemic, their kids not being, you know, in school, you know, distance learning, mask mandates, all of that has really brought people, like you say, more interest from parents. So you're right, there may be more people willing to actually, put their hand up to actually run.
Be part of the solution. Maybe
Yep.
tomorrow night's a good night to plug that there's a vacancy, 'cause I hear you're gonna have a pretty full house tomorrow night.
Well, it's not in person, so it is in Zoom, we're doing Zoom
Yes.
format still. So I suspect that once, the superintendent announces what the plan is, a lot of people may just, say, okay, that's the deal. I don't want to give it away before we actually talk about it tomorrow, but I suspect a lot of people, I mean, certainly in August when we were live, there were people that came to our meetings. We actually had a police presence at the high school just in case. Because we certainly saw some violent activity at some of we really had it pretty easy in Coventry, quite honestly. We had some people come to the microphone during those in-person meetings, but for the most part, they were extremely respectful and they were not, but I mean, obviously I saw, things on the news in North Kingstown and some other places, Westerly, they have had some real contentious school board meetings, but not so much in Coventry, thank goodness.
I wonder why people don't want to run for office.
Scott, do you have any questions? I think you're muted.
Yeah, no questions. I mean, I'm kind of curious how much it costs for a police detail at these meetings. That's always an interesting cost to me of when you have a police detail, what is the cost for those,
I suspect Mr. Town manager could speak to that. I want to say it's in the neighborhood of $150, but I'm not sure. It could be much more than that. I don't have any idea.
It depends on how we bring the officer in. If we're just continuing an officer on shift and they're getting overtime, then it's going to be closer to the $45 an hour. If we have to call someone in who was off duty, that's an automatic 4-hour callback. And so it'll be closer to $200. It just depends. There had been a regular police presence at the town council meetings until I got here. And I said, no, have the patrol officer stop in for the first 5 minutes and then the presence is known and they can go and no one will, and it hasn't been a problem. I'm more tolerant of a little bit of risk than some people, but if you don't have anything controversial to worry about, no. We did have people at the meetings, a police presence in the fall a couple of times because things were getting a little more spicy, but no incidents, so.
That's good.
And I think at our meetings, the reason we even thought about a police officer was because the meeting, I think we couldn't get the senior center. And so we had to go to the high school and the mandate, the mask mandate had already been announced by the governor for all school buildings. So our kids had to wear, we were in a school building. So everybody had to wear a mask, including the public that were going to come in and maybe potentially speak. So we didn't want to have to be the police people up on the stage, basically saying, please put your mask on, please put your mask on. And if someone refused, what would our option be? And so even like I think in North Kingstown, the school committee just walked off the stage basically, and I didn't want to do that. So as it turns out, we had one maybe confrontation, but the people basically went back to their car and got the mask and came back, so people were respectful and put their masks on knowing that it was a school. If we had been in the senior center, we never enforced that because it was a municipal building. And so we didn't have to enforce it. But in the school, being in the high school, we had to, so.
Oh, boy. So we're tasked with finding a way to make things work better for the town. My thought was that and I think the majority of the people on the commission agree that the experiment of nonpartisan has kind of like pushed people away from running. And you're seeing less people vote. They may be going to the polls to vote for someone in a higher office, but not worrying about what's going on, down the street from themselves. So it's interesting to try to figure out what to do and to stay within the state law when it comes to, filling the vacancies on the school committee. So apparently that's going to be one of the things we're going to have our council look at so that we can't write something into the charter that's inconsistent with state law.
Yeah.
And the election law. So the election law and and the school committee saying they're two different, state issues that we have to kind of adhere to.
I can understand why the former, it was, voted that they wanted nonpartisan. I get the reasons why. The only problem with that, there's always been drop off as you go down the ballot. And so, depending on when a school committee member ran. So for me, I always ran in the off year. It wasn't the presidential year, it was the governor race or the state officers races. And because of that, people go to vote because they're interested in the state office. And they might vote, as they go down the ballot. If you're not a well-informed citizen, if you don't know who the people are, you rather not vote at all than to vote. And so previously, when it was you were either Democratic or Republican or Independent, people at least saw that and said, oh, I lean Republican, so I'll go with the Republican, or I lean Democrat, even if they didn't really know the issues that person represented. Once we went nonpartisan, it became even more drop off on the ballot, because if they didn't know you at all, they might just say, well, I don't know these people, so I'm not going to vote. And so when you look, you look at the tallies across the districts, you see the drop off, almost everybody that goes in votes for like the governor or the president or whatever. But then you look down and you count the same votes and it's like, hey, wait a second, what did those people do? They just went in and voted for who they knew, the president, governor, secretary of state or whatever, and then just don't know the people below on the ballot and they just walk away. So, and I've heard people say that. I know you, Kathy, so I voted for you because I've been around a long time and I was in PTA. But I've asked that question to people, like, since we went nonpartisan, what do you think? And they say, well, if they don't know who the person is, they don't know their affiliation, and so they're just like, they just don't bother to vote on that particular office. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think that's a consideration that you guys have to think about.
Anyone have any more input or questions for Kathy? And I do think, Kathy, that the year they have the presidential election is not the same year that they have state executive seat elections like governor.
Exactly, it's opposite. So it's like, that's why I say I always ran, my 4 years always coincided with the governor's race. I never ran during the presidential race.
Yeah. So,
but there were other committee members because we're off. There's 3 of us that run 1 year, during the election, and then they go back and forth.
2 people always have the president, the
Two
other 3
districts.
always have the governor.
Yeah, 2 districts always have the presidential election.
Yeah,
well, go ahead, Jim.
This is one question, so I'm clear. I'm just looking at the charter. So if you have a special election, so special election is 12 months or more prior to the next regular election, they are on the school committee until the next regular election, then they can run again.
Next regular election for that seat, the beginning of the new term, and then they can run again.
Because they're always just filling in the
Right, so the
remainder of
special
the
election
term.
is for the remainder of the term that was vacated, and then the next general election, next election for that seat
Got it.
is
Same
a
thing with the
4-year term,
appointment.
so yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So
They keep them synced.
but the other idea that we were kicking around is like appointment to the next
Right,
election, statewide election.
yeah,
So if you're in the first 2 years of the term, appoint to what would be the term's midpoint. That would be essentially a special election coinciding with the general election, and then
Right.
it'd be fill out 2 years, and then the seat comes up like it normally does.
Right. Like I said, it could be 23 months.
Right, so
or
yeah, it could be
whatever.
23 months, it could be.
They'd have to quit
7
the day
months,
after
or-
they got elected to make it
Right.
2 years.
Which is a good idea, and we'll have to make sure that it isn't inconsistent with what the state requires us to do for school committee seats. So,
The other thing, just Ben, looking at like timelines, just looking at the special election we're having right now, the vacancy, I don't know when Luke formally resigned, but we knew about it in December. The election is not till May. That's 4+ months trying to fill a seat. And I'm assuming that's the fastest we could, isn't there?
It's a statutory state election,
Okay,
so it's
Title
defined by
17.
state.
got it. That's the other thing. We lose a lot of time waiting to conduct these special elections.
Well, you can't plan on someone moving out of state. or
Right,
someone passing away.
Oh, I'm not saying anything against people who need to vacate for whatever reason. I'm just saying it just takes, with the format we have right now, it takes a long time.
Yeah,
If you could just appoint to the
Right.
next general election, then the seat might only be vacant for a month.
Right.
Or less.
I see what you mean, because right after somebody resigns, you
Yeah.
can then fill it, instead
Yeah.
of waiting for this period of time.
Because right now the school committee has a vacancy and it's February right now. It's not gonna be filled till May.
Got it.
So,
And you might.
Yeah, that's,
put a rule
that's
in
really
there.
a long time. Yeah, and
Right.
actually Luke's date of resignation was December 23rd. So,
okay, thank you.
You might put a rule in the charter where if the town council doesn't fill the vacancy within 30, 45, 60 days,
Mhm.
then it goes to another body. I saw this in Pennsylvania where there was actually it was a board of elections. There was 3 people that if the council didn't decide, then it fell to them. And if they didn't decide within 30 more days, then it went to the municipal judge who just appointed someone. So there was kind of this backstop for if things got political or people
Yep.
didn't have any candidates. that-
safety valve.
a safety
It'll just go
valve,
down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that'd be interesting to look at.
yeah,
I'll
that's
look
something
that
to
up.
think about.
There's something somewhat close to that. I was just reading this, somebody resigns, there needs to be a special election. It's within the time frame. If by the 30th day after the vacancy occurs, town clerk fails to call a special election, and the board of canvassers shall call such election to fill the vacancy within 45 days of the occurrence of the vacancy.
That's in our charter right now.
Yes.
correct?
Yeah, that's-
Yeah,
Yes.
that's one of those.
So there
I
is
have to stare at that a little longer, I think.
Okay.
It's the declaration of an
Yeah.
election rather than an appointment.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, and when you declare an election, you still have to go through.
Then there's the posting.
You know,
it,
the
and-
declaration period, you have to, there's a lot of.
Advertising.
There's your December demand.
advertising, Right, right.
Wasn't there something,
And
I
if it's
remember them saying last
partisan,
year,
you're talking
you can
about
only have
possibly a
elections on the first
primary, then possibly.
Tuesday or the month or something.
So it
Like
could
you
be
can't
2
have something like
You
that.
can't be just any
You can't just pick a day and say we're having one.
It has to be on a Tuesday.
Well, I know, not even that, it was like, it had to be like the first Tuesday, or first
Tuesday
Tuesday
after-
after the first Monday
After
of the
the first
month.
Monday. Yeah, that's.
Like there's one day a month you can hold an election,
Right.
kind of thing. I think. Something like that.
That's interesting too. I remember a special election when I was in Attleboro. 30 people came out to vote. It was in June. Everybody was gone, school was over,
Mhm.
everybody was on vacation. So the timing of that's very important.
Right.
But filling that gap is important. That's a big gap.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Well, there has to be, most importantly, that vote there.
That's right.
And,
That's not right.
oh, I don't know. So. I actually, by the way, I made copies. I don't know if I told you.
That's an interesting concept. If you did a hybrid where if you still kept the special elections to keep the hands and the power of the voters, but you allowed the council to make the appointment.
In the
The
interim,
appointment could have been made in January.
Let's fill the
You
gap.
would have
Until
had
the
January,
special
February,
election.
March, April, and then the election in May. And you'd have at least 4 months more coverage.
Yep.
You'd have 5 votes instead of 4.
You might even get, given the conversation too, you might get somebody that gets to be on the school committee for a few months and say, I may run for this now.
Right, so you get to the January or
'Cause it's a
February
short-
23rd, 24th filing date. And now
and you've been
have
doing it for a
someone
month and a
that's
half and you're like. oh,
They said, yeah, this isn't so
tested.
bad, yeah.
Right, right.
Filling that gap's a good idea. You can't argue with that. That shouldn't be a gap.
Yeah, I think they should be able to fill as soon as they're, or relatively as soon as there's an appointment, and then maybe it's something where if it's like maybe more than a year, we have from the general election, like we were saying, like, so like in this circumstance, I would say appoint till next November. If we were, let's say, a year removed, then maybe we have a special election because the appointment could have been like 23, 22 months, but now we appoint for that 5-month gap that we're waiting while conducting an election. So kind of like split the difference. So it's gotta be like a big gap that we need the special election for.
You fill the gap.
Fill the gap either way. We're just
Then-
determining whether we want to have a special election. I think the appointment shouldn't exceed 12 months, so maybe we can word it that way. Kind of just count backwards. If the appointment's going to be for more than 12 months, or the next election wouldn't be for more than 12 months, so then we have to have a special election.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just because if you go to partisan and then you see the town council, if it's more than, if it's for a few months and they appoint somebody and it goes back to partisan, they, say the town council is mostly Democrat and then they appoint a Democrat, you could see the other side of the coin scream bloody murder. That wasn't fair and all that. But if it's a short appointment for a few months, you could say, look, it's just a short appointment. You're going to have a special election, so you're going to have your bite at the cake at the election, and that kind of takes it out. Because I could see if you don't have a special election and then one side, either a Republican or Democrat council appoints another Republican to the school committee, or the Democrat does it, you're going to see that contentious other side will be crying foul no matter what. So I think what he was just explaining there, I think works out very nicely.
Yeah, if you think about it too, I mean, Republican or Democrat, when I was thinking about this from other earlier meetings, it could be, there's a key item on the table to be approved, a new high school, some huge.
Or something in the curriculum
something
that's
huge.
being,
Party aside.
Right.
They might want somebody
It could be
who
split.
aligns with that
Yeah.
big project or whatever they want to
Mhm.
approve.
Well,
Which
if we
we,
go back to partisan elections, then perhaps the appointment should be from the same party as the person. that
Well,
vacated
that's
that
what it
position.
used to
that's
be.
correct, yes. I've seen that I was reading some other, remember the little research, other towns, that's what they,
Some towns, some states.
that's a
even have that.
benefit to doing that, so you keep,
It stays the
similar
Fine, so
value,
honestly,
We're,
way,
we're,
Same values.
we're holding the
right?
previous election, the will of the voters was someone in this party. So at least ideologically, we're still keeping the term consistent with what was elected.
Correct.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about when Mike Reeves was appointed, he was a Democrat. And then Lisa Tomaso ran against him and won. And she was a Democrat as well. So it doesn't always
She ran as an
follow that.
independent. Yeah, she ran as an independent.
I'm sorry?
First term,
Lisa ran as an independent.
Oh, she did? I thought she was a Democrat.
No, when she
Oh.
ran for
My mistake.
when she ran for the representative seat, I think she ran as a Democrat.
Yeah,
Oh,
she
okay.
ran as a Democrat when she ran for the rep. Yep.
Oh, I guess I'm wrong then. Sorry. But I do
Not-
like that
You're not
idea.
entirely
about-
wrong.
I'm sorry?
You're not entirely wrong. And I had wrote something down last week,
So
all
I
these
can't vote
things.
for you anymore.
The District 5 School Committee seat, someone moved and the town council had to make an appointment and they appointed Wayne Astle.
Mhm.
I don't know for how long it was. It may have only been for a few weeks, but I think it's in here. I think it's like a end of the road type thing for Wayne. It was a little article that was in either the Times or the Courier, one of those two. So that was another appointment that was made that probably was overlooked only for the short term. I think Deb Bacon had left her seat because she moved. I'm not 100% sure.
I couldn't remember. I can't remember that either.
Yeah, so.
Laurie
and then-
Anderson would know.
Yeah, and then, oh, wait a minute, no, that was after, excuse me, I'm wrong. That was after Tammy Duxbury left.
Oh, yeah, I think that's what it was. Yeah, Tammy
Yeah.
moved to Virginia
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah,
Yep.
Tammy Duxbury moved and then it was council that it wasn't school committee. I was confusing myself there.
And then Deb, I think, won the next election.
Yes, she did. Yeah.
That's
Deb
what
won the
happened.
next election.
Yeah, that was 2016 then. Yeah.
It might be in the ballot thing there. Oh, no, it wouldn't be.
No, it was
That was a
2016.
council- That was a council appointment, so.
Yeah, she ran in 2016 and won that seat because that was the first year I ran. That was the first time she was running. And
Yeah.
then 2020 she ran again but lost to Councilwoman Shockley.
Yeah.
All right, does anybody have any more input on this problem that we're gonna have with trying to figure out the difference between what the election law says and what we want the charter to say? Any more input from anyone here?
It just seems like we can fill the gap, which is important.
Yeah,
And then the special election, which we're trying to minimize. But it does, correct me if I'm wrong, special election does fill out the remaining term.
Correct, yeah. So if you're elected and then first day on the job you quit, we may say special election, but it's for the last 3 plus whatever years.
Right.
From that date of election. So
and like Ben said, have an interim appointment? Is that what you thought?
Was
To
my
have that fit-
suggestion,
to
yeah,
have
so
that
that you
fit
don't have
vote?
5 or 6 months before your next.
So,
special.
So even if we have a
trying-
special election, we create the ability for town council or whatever trickle down
right,
to appoint for the interim
Until the special.
until the
election.
special.
Until
election.
the
So,
So we're not
based on-
removing, we're not removing a special election.
No. So
In a
two
sense,
things.
yeah.
Decide which special election, when the special election is required, and then separately create the ability to appoint until either a special election or the regular election if it was within the end of the term period. Kind of like two things there.
Okay.
But the other one was like, in this case, like
An either or.
either, yeah,
Yeah.
Have some flexibility.
right.
So-
But also clarify the question of if the vacancy occurs within a year of a election, but not necessarily the election for that particular seat.
I think we should still.
We need
move in that
to, we need to be able
direction,
to, we need to state that
Right,
too,
so that way we could use this November
as that and
Without having
create.
to have the special.
Correct.
without
Right,
having
that's
to
right.
have a special election, so we'd give council the chance to appoint someone till this November.
Mhm.
Then be able to run the seat as
Correct.
an election.
but they can't now, so.
They can't now, we're having a special election. It's
Yeah.
not-
So,
But we can avoid it happening in the future.
Yeah, that's it, we're trying to,
all right. So, we're gonna be discussing this more. We're not gonna take any votes, of course, unless we have 9 people, and we're gonna have a couple of more vacancies, so. We'll move on to new business. And I brought up something I have issues with, and that's powers and duties. 3.14, has anybody looked at that? This is the law that's against state law. Kathy, I think you know about this one. It was added, I think, in 2010.
Oh, that's the one where the town council approves, does the final approval of the teacher contract, I believe.
Yeah.
So what it is it's 3.14 powers and duties, section O. And it says, no collective bargaining agreement between the town of Coventry, including the school committee, and any labor organization shall become effective unless and until ratified by majority vote of the Coventry Town Council. That was passed, I believe, and it's become a practice simply to stop any like arguments and stuff. But the law actually says it's just something that actually would trigger a Carullo Act. And the law says under Chapter 2, Title 16, Chapter 2, Section C, the elected school committees of each city, town, or regional school district, or the chief executive officer of any municipality having an appointed school committee, they'll have the power to bind their successors and successor committees by entering into contracts of employment in the exercise of their governmental functions. So what the law says is that the city of Providence school committee is different than an elected school committee. So the decisions are made for the most part by the mayor. But an elected school committee has that authority. And that is, I brought this up to them when they were passing it. I said, you're in violation of the law. And they actually called in Edwards and Angel. No, excuse me. They called in Joe Larissa, who came and told them that, no, the language says that it's this. But what he chose not to say was that you have to be an appointed school committee instead of an elected school committee. So I don't know if you guys want to deal deep into this, but it's a clear violation of the state law. And we can either leave it there and let it go to court, or we can repeal it.
As the new guy,
Yeah.
I'll just say that that's not what was explained to me, why it was put in there and how it got there. So for my 2 cents of what I've heard, and the perspective is that this was intended to be a check on the school department making financial decisions that may be adverse to the voters of the town and passing the annual budget. So whether that's true, accurate, skewed, whatever, for what it's worth, that's what I heard. And that there was a genuine interest on the part of someone to have the town council check anything that the school committee approves when it has a fiscal impact. Maybe there's a different way of addressing that concern, but
But it's in violation of law.
I hadn't read that law, and
Okay.
if I could reread what you just.
I think that's something that if we engage legal counsel, we need to
A
ask.
Oh,
legal,
yeah.
yeah, I would ask for a legal opinion on that.
So all I did was I highlighted and read the actual language, but if you go to the minutes from that charter review, you'll find out that the first vote taken on it was a vote of no, because it was against state law. And they brought someone in to come in and tell them that it's not against state law.
I'm not an attorney, and I don't understand the language when it says shall have the power to bind their successors and successor committees. That sounds like a delegation of authority downward, not upward to the voters.
That
So-
sounds to me like it's saying this school
A
committee
contract
could
is a
sign a
contract.
contract and we're all leaving tomorrow. The new committee's coming in
Right,
and
the
you're
new
stuck with
committee
it. But it's
inherits
still within, yeah.
But it's not going up the chain
Correct.
to the town council or the voters. So
Correct.
It's one way, but not the other. What does it really mean in this application?
Yeah.
So I would want a legal opinion.
Kathy, you were at that meeting, right?
I was, and our school council at the time was John Anderson. And he spoke against and said it was against the law. He still feels that way. But again, I guess it was Vince Regasta, I think was the town attorney, who said, no. And he convinced the committee to reverse their no decision and vote yes for the change in the charter. And then, of course, it went to the citizens and they agreed as well. So the interesting thing for me is, since that charter change happened, the town council has always approved whatever the teachers basically had ratified. So I'm not sure, how valid, that whole change was, because, so the first thing is, previous to the change in the charter, when I first got elected, which was in 2002, there was a decision made that we would no longer not have a contract attorney be at the table with management, i.e. the school committee and the superintendent and, those guys across from the Coventry Teachers Union. And so at the time, I forget, I guess his name was Dan Kinder, represented us for a couple of sessions, for a couple of contracts. And he sat there. Right before I came on board, actually Fran Frobel for the first time was invited to be a participant of the committee, the negotiation team. And he sat through most of, so there was a contract right before I came on board that was in fact ratified. But Fran Frobel was there at the table and also recommended, and I think Dan Kinder was too, because there was an outcry from the public that, the former school committee that had been, there had been people on that committee that had been in the seats for a while, and they basically kind of just did a handshake with the president of the CTA union and the non-certified staff. They didn't really sit down and do any hard-nosed bargaining. I'm not sure previous to that, I don't know when the last time it happened that there was, but there was this perception in town that, it was like pretty much a handshake, not, from the former chairman of the school committee. And then, of course, that chairman actually resigned. And I won't even go into that because it's just too long a story. But what ultimately happened is when he left, the vice chair said, we're in the middle of trying to negotiate a new contract. We need more people at the table and we need town representation. So that happened, and I wasn't involved with that one. The next one I was involved with, we had town representation. Town manager came and went. There was a town council member. We always put that out. Please attend and be part of this, because we didn't want to do it alone anymore. So I thought that was very successful. Since the town council has ratified our contracts with the CTA, the Coventry Teacher Alliance, our town council participation has been up and down. There have been some times where, full participation at every meeting, there was a town councilman there. This last go around, it was very spotty. So it was basically, and we basically, even before the before the town council ratified, we always felt that there should be a town councilman there who would be there and listen to all of the back and forth and the negotiations, and then be able to bring it back to their own council and say, listen, this really is the best we could do. It's sort of like the school committee trying to say, well, how come the police contract, isn't better than it is? Why didn't you do this, this, and this? If you're not sitting at the table, it's very easy to throw stones and not as easy to, make the assumption that good faith bargaining had in fact happened. So I'm not sure how I feel. I mean, I personally have not minded the town council being the final say, because it's worked out one way or the other. We've been able to convince the council, sit down with them and have some meetings, even if they weren't really participating at the negotiation table. If you change that, I think that maybe there should be something in the charter that says, that puts it in writing, that because I'll be gone, people on the committee will be gone, people forget that, the town council should have a representative, or maybe that the town manager should sit on those negotiations. And then maybe it wouldn't be imperative that the town council needed to actually do the final voting. I think there should be some guardrails up, just because there's distrust in the community in general with any contract negotiation. So if you can build in some trust there by saying, we had a participant from the town council, they, brought some things back to the town council, they agreed with this particular contract, it's the best we could do with good faith bargaining, then maybe we wouldn't break the law, so to speak. I think that if we did, we decided not to take it to court because we just didn't want, first of all, want the fight. We didn't want to spend the money. And again, I think the public may vote that down unless there's some guardrails put in place by this charter commission to say, okay, we're going to, maybe revert back to the way it was, but we definitely there's a requirement that there has to be town manager participation at those negotiation meetings and perhaps a town council member. But that's just my feeling on the matter.
So the way I feel about it, used to be a legislator, dealt with many words, and the word shall is shall. The
Yep.
word may is may. And
Yep.
the word in this says shall. So short of having the town council just decide that they want to appoint a school committee, there's no other way out of it.
Yeah.
So
No,
you would
I
have to change, you would have to change the charter to say, we're going to appoint the school committee and have no elections for school committee. And right now with the inability to get people to stay in office, it's almost an option. But like I said, the word shall is shall. So we are in violation of the law.
Right.
So to repeal it would be one thing, to sweeten it up would be another. But at the time, it was what it was, is it was a power struggle for the town council to run the school committee business. And that's what pretty much I got out of it, and a whole bunch of other people.
Oh, yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah.
So here we are, violating the law, and how do we address it? Do we put frosting on it, or do we say you can't do that unless this commission decides they want to put a mayor on board and the mayor appoints a school committee? Then, you know, we'd be within the law. So as long as there's an elected school committee, you have to do it by state law.
Mhm.
So maybe this is something that we can all kind of maybe try to get some language to put in there that keeps us from violating that law. Like I always said, it's the state law is state law, and the schools run under that.
I'm gonna hear two things, right, Scott? One is the law of an elected versus an appointed school committee, and we have an elected school committee.
Right.
Kathy's saying, I think additionally, if what we have currently carries on, to make sure the town manager and or town council is more included or more inclusive in the early collective bargaining negotiations. I mean, that's one thing, but the law is, that's what you're saying, is kind of
Unfortunately,
eliminates this because
it's
it's,
blunt. It's in violation.
And that's never gonna
I
really
still
be-
take exception to the interpretation that a lawyer would give, because I read it a little differently about the successors being future school committees, not the council.
Well, future school committees are going to be coming up in, I believe, about how many months?
Yeah.
So we may have a totally different school committee.
Well, that's true. And so they'll
And
be
they are-
bound to the contract.
They'll be bound.
But
they'll
You
be
sign a
bound.
3-year
the-
contract, but everyone leaves,
But the
you're 2 years
decisions of
left,
the
still
school
in.
committee being overseen by the town council. My reading right now is that it is outside of the scope of what the state law says, that they're not in conflict, that they're not in contradiction. It's silent on it or ambiguous at best. But again, not the lawyer, so I would defer to some legal clarification on that.
Yeah, well,
that's what I'm wondering, because most school committees in the state are, I believe, are elected, right? So maybe this town council then takes the elected school committee and appoints them to do the collective bargaining agreement. Maybe there's some subtlety to the language, you know.
you
So
can't
we'll
have-
find out. We'll find
Because
out.
this is-
I do know that Coventry is not the only town with elected school committee members where the town council has the final say. So we're not an exception. I don't know how many there are, but I think there was sort of a trend. And partly, I think a lot of school committees didn't fight it for the following reason. School committees have for many, many years, when I was first on, we were the scapegoat. You know, if we asked for too much money or more money than, you know, people felt that we deserved one way or the other, or our needs were, you know, not, you know, needs that everybody agreed with, then they would say, well, you did a bad job with your collective bargaining agreement. You gave the teachers too much money, you gave them too much benefits, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I haven't heard that in a long time, since the town council also has to agree. So in fact, even if it's a new town council, we can always say, well, town council agreed with this contract 3 years ago or 2 years ago. So that's kind of like, so a lot of school committees have kind of liked that, rather than trying, you know, because it's human nature to make a scapegoat when you don't have enough money. If there's plenty of money and good resources, okay, fine, you know, you battle it out. But, you know, one of the reasons why school committee members feel battered around is because, you know, we're the biggest bite of the budget. We're, you know, we're the ones who need the most resources because we have more teachers, more employees, et cetera, et cetera. The citizens of the town don't understand the fine tunes of that. And so they just think, you know, that's just way too much money. And then depending on the town council, they'll say the same thing because they're trying to keep the taxes down. So at least from the contract point of view, you can actually say, well, the town council did approve it as well. So are we all in bed together trying to make the teachers rich? Or is this because it's market driven and we have to, you know, we have to have good schools, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So
What happens when the town council says no?
Exactly.
That's, yeah.
that will be a problem, obviously, but it would bring it back to the bargaining table. And if there's unfair labor practices that occur, then the teachers could go to some kind of, arbitration or whatever, I think, but I'm not 100%.
If it's an unfair labor practice, it goes to the labor board, which is
Exactly.
very sympathetic to the unions. So
Right.
No, it becomes a Carullo action.
That's if
It means that the school committee has to sue the town.
That's when they don't get enough
Well-
money, I thought.
not a Carullo typically is not because they wouldn't, agree with a contract. I think it'd go back to the bargaining table.
yeah.
And then if you could not ever find resolution, then the school committee and or whatever might make a decision. But Carullo typically is when you get your budget, the local, allocation, and we know as a school committee, it's not going to cover what we need to do for the year. And, there have been some towns and cities that have done that. Since I've been on school committee, I have never wanted to sue the town, mainly because of the following reason. There have been some years that we've barely squeaked by. I mean, it's been devastating. We've made cuts, et cetera, et cetera. But a Carullo action literally strips everything from the schools. So you can't just say, okay, you know what? We have enough money to run sports, or we have enough money to run clubs, but we don't have enough money for the ELA teacher. Carullo, when you start that action against your city or town, the arbitrator, the person comes in and says, okay, you're down to skin and bones. And so all control over what you may or may not end up with is taken away from the school committee, quite honestly. And you start from scratch. It can be an extremely devastating decision for a school committee to make, first of all. And then there are all the legal costs. By the time you may win the case, you've already cost your town so much money that it doesn't feel like it's a good thing to do. And there have been some actions that have failed. Obviously, Cranston has done it and failed, and they regretted it. So, when the school attorneys find out, from other school attorneys, that this and this happened, even our school attorney, John Anderson, basically has been cautious. If you do this, if it's bad enough and you need more money and you have to sue your town, you're going down a long road and it might take you years to get back. You might win it and the town will have to fork over more money, but you still have all the legal costs on both sides. And it is extremely devastating to a community. And, obviously I'm going to be gone November of 22, but I hope that any new committee would not be led down that road lightly.
It sounds like a poison pill that's bad for everyone, because you're gonna have bad PR. The voters are like, hey, I pay taxes to both, and they're using them to fight each other.
It's a horrible situation, quite honestly. So Carullo, I think there are other ways we could approach sort of asking towns and cities to not only do the maintenance of effort, but if your school funding goes down per the funding formula, there's no law that says your town has to give you the money to make it up. So in other words, usually if our school aid goes down, it's because the community can pay more. People don't get that, but that's the truth of it. We make, enough money, our real estate is worth more, whatever the reason, that's why it goes down. And there's nothing in the law that says, okay, guess what, Coventry, Cranston, whatever, this is what we believe every child should get. And here's the local amount. Now you've got your maintenance of effort, but the local amount might need to go up if your state aid goes down. And a lot of towns and cities do not follow that. They just, do the maintenance of effort and give the smallest amount. And if you've lost state aid, they just say, hey, make it work. So I would.
Who signs the contract?
I'm sorry?
Who signs a contract after it's negotiated?
The school committee members and the CTA president.
Okay,
The town.
So that-
council-
And the town council.
so no, the town council does not sign that contract.
Nope, no.
I thought it was in there.
It's
that they-
ratified by a vote or a resolution, but not a signature.
They put,
Yeah, they don't sign it. We
I thought it
sign it.
listed like the town council president. No?
no,
I don't think so. I don't remember after ever needing your signature on our
I'm
book.
just,
so the school committee signs a contract in accordance with law.
Mhm.
And if you say, well, we're gonna let the town council say whether we're doing a good job or not, it's against the law.
I
According to
know
what state law says. That's,
It does seem to be a conflict, but obviously people are doing it. And unless you decide to sue for that, and that's why we didn't sue, Scott, to be perfectly honest. Because, you know, I was very strongly against it, obviously. The school committee at the time was against it. School administration was against it. Our lawyer was against it. So the only action we would have had, it was passed, the charter, you know, the charter that was passed by the town, those charter revisions.
regardless of whether or not the charter change was legal.
Well, it would have to be contested, so
Yeah.
lots of.
It would have to be contested. We would have
But
had.
if no one, but until
Unconstitutional.
someone actually contests it,
Until it gets decided in court of law
Right.
that it's unconstitutional, it stands.
we've seen laws like couldn't have gambling, sports gambling. That was on the books for almost 30 years until the Supreme Court said, nope, this law is unconstitutional. And then, okay, it's gone, but it was enforced for a while.
You should be able to shoot residents of Massachusetts after dark in Rhode Island.
Oh, I want to see that one in writing.
That was a blue law.
So,
What was it?
Any resident from Massachusetts that caught in Rhode Island after dark could be shot.
I think dueling is still outlawed in Rhode Island.
Wow.
Oh, that's really. Yeah, so I know
Yeah,
you.
this goes back to Roger Williams, time, the old blue laws.
Well, here's where
It's
we're
been
at,
repealed.
you know. I
That'll be
believe-
it'll be for the commission, you guys to decide whether or not. And I think you can get a legal opinion. I think the town's legal opinion will be, it's within, you know, the limits of the law.
We're discussing getting outside counsel to advise this commission
Yep,
so that there's no conflict of interest for existing counsel.
that's good. And I think that's a wise move. And ask that counselor what they feel. Because I'm sure that you'll find an equal number of people that say, you know, because John Anderson was one of them, like, no, that's illegal. It's against the law. I remember sitting in the town council at the charter commission and standing up and him standing up and saying it as well. And, you know, we were looked at like, no, you're wrong. So
Well, it didn't look wrong to me while I was on that charter commission.
I know there were a few people, including Ann Dixon on that. And she was one of the people that was for that. I can remember because I didn't know her. And of course, she finally ran for school committee, but I remember her clearly on that committee and asking me questions and why I felt X, Y, Z or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But it sounds to me like this is an area that's ripe to have a problem. And perhaps we ought to take a look at seeing how we can diffuse that problem before it occurs, as opposed to after it goes through courts and battles like that. Because as you said, what happens if the town council doesn't ratify it?
Well, right now, it means we go back to the drawing board
And try again.
negotiations and try again.
Okay, but this is
It's
also,
the kind of the same
this is also a
thing.
collective bargaining agreement. And you've got the teachers union might not like that,
No,
and they can go directly and sue directly from that.
Yeah.
So, well,
It's
whether or
right,
not
it's right
they
for legal
will,
action.
or whether or not they won't, that's
Right.
fine. The town council has always ratified it. That's fine too. Let's see if we can avoid the risk of that, because all that does is spend taxpayer money.
I have to agree with that. I think that's well said because the players change. And so new people coming on board, we have no idea what the CTA would do if the town council did not ratify their agreement. They could, in fact, you know, say, no, we're not going back to the table and we're going to sue because you know what, guess what? It's against state law that you're even
They're
part of
gonna
the
win.
process.
that would be
And typically the
problematic.
town council votes last, right? It's usually the teachers ratify, the school committee ratifies, then the town council's last, right?
Yeah, they're the last ones, yeah.
So they could say, well, both sides that are responsible for it have agreed to it. It's, the town council vote was irrelevant, but then try to sue for that.
I'm not sure. I mean, I think there's a ratification, Ted, but I'm not sure. They don't sign until the town council does. So
Okay.
sort of like, you know, it's sort of in limbo. We don't say, okay, this is great. The teachers, you know, have their meeting and ratify and we sign it.
It's like any
Really-
negotiation I conduct is going to be tentative until it's passed.
Exactly,
Right.
until it's finally accepted. Yeah. So. But
Thank you,
it's
Ken.
never happened that it hasn't been. So, but that point is well made that if it isn't, then whoever, the CTA president might be, or their board might say, okay, this is for the birds and we're not gonna adhere to this. And, saying what Scott said, there's two interpretations that appears to that law. And we're not the only ones. I don't know if any other school committee has run into the problems with the town council not approving, but I know we're not the only ones. And it was kind of a kind of the vogue thing to do when it was changed here in Coventry. We weren't the first ones at that point either. And I think several more have done the same exact thing. So again, we've never.
We get our legal counsel in here. We'll get an opinion. We'll figure out if it's legitimate. And if it's not, and it's in violation of state law,
Right.
we either repeal it or amend it.
Mhm.
To make it, it could be just
Could be an advisory.
an advisory, or just to make people happy and take the politics out of things. And
I just worry that straight up repealing it and saying, even if it's because we're told this is against state law, the town, I fear, because there is this distrust that basically they're gonna be like, no, we need that because we don't want the school committee giving away the farm, so to speak. That's, I think that's the perception that's out there.
Exactly, yeah.
I think the danger that is that the charter, that particular charter amendment would fail. And so I think you might need to look at it in a little different manner, perhaps. I don't know. It's just my thought too as well. So.
this looks to me like it's something that just actually puts you into a legal argument where it's going to cost money. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a gray area, when I looked at it, but if you go to, and if they sue, say they sue one day and go to court, it depends what judge you get. One judge can go this way, one judge can go the other way. And guess what? If they don't like that, they can appeal it, or the town can appeal it, or the town council can appeal it, and then an appellate court could, or another judge could rule against it and send it back down, or say, no, it's invalid. It is not in violation. So it's not just because there's a lawsuit doesn't mean it's gonna be the end all, of it. It could snowball for a long time in court till it reaches.
It could outlive the contract.
Yeah.
It could reach, so it could take years to reach the Rhode Island Supreme Court to rule on something if they want to hear it. So it's interesting, and I think everyone can agree we all like to avoid that. So
I think judges know the meaning of the word shall when it comes to law.
yeah, well, there's judges that look at the Constitution and interpret things totally different way, including the Second Amendment. So I mean,
All right, so this is probably going to be an interesting issue, and when we have our legal counsel in here, we'll get a little bit of advice for it. Then next I had section 1520, which is the first. It's how we amend the charter. So I think the last charter review, or the one before, the last charter review, the council said no to everything. And then the charter review came back. I'm not exactly sure which one they got through. And I'm not sure if the last section that says the full text of a charter or amendments to the charter don't have to go on the ballot. So back then, if you looked at the ballot that I gave you, you're going to see that it's quite lengthy. The questions were, keeping people right in the voting booth for 10 to 15 minutes. And there was a change. I think the legal counsel for the town probably wrote the charter changes in legislative form, which is additions and
Strike
deletions.
throughs and all
Yeah.
those.
So it kind of probably made longer lines at the polls for people to either look at it, or in most cases, they just turned around and just even look at it because nobody has time to do that. So that language passed, which is that third paragraph. But when you go to the first paragraph, there were some changes if you looked on your ballots, it would show the new stuff, which would be beginning with the general election be held in 2020, which pretty much says we don't want anybody to be on this committee. Take a look at it. You can't be this, you can't be that. All right. So you can't have more than 2 appointments. You can't be elected or appointed official or an employee of the town or of a department, office, or agency of the town. Said committee shall. Within 6 months of the appointment, submit to town council. I agree with the point about not being a town employee or someone that
Yeah, it looks like
That
it's
works
really
for
trying
any of the-
to
any
not
of the
have it be a
departments.
self-serving
yeah.
Right.
Right.
So
interest.
let me see.
So
You
appointed
can't be elected or
officials,
appointed official.
I agree with the elected official because they have a direct interest, but appointed officials aren't really addressed with any powers, authorities, or benefits. And so if it happened to be a member of the planning commission or the zoning hearing board or the economic development commission, I don't think they should be precluded from serving on a body like this, because I don't think they have a conflict of interest. They're volunteer citizens doing extra volunteer duty.
Mhm.
And I don't see a conflict, but the conflict is the biggest issue I see that's trying to be addressed. And with the history of Coventry and the cloud of suspicion about who got what special details.
Well, I was an elected official when I served on it the last time. And according to this, I wouldn't have been able to serve on it this time.
I thought it was town elected
It doesn't
officials.
specify.
Doesn't
Oh.
specify.
Should it, like,
Should you have a state senator on your commission that probably can bring some information, from the state house or a
Or a
representative.
Like, I agree that we shouldn't maybe not have
maybe eliminate school committee and town council members.
Right.
But not
those,
someone serving on a fire district board. or
right.
Any other elected
Yeah,
office.
this would probably preclude that from.
Mhm.
from
And
being
I
on.
think that does go beyond what I would assume is the intent in the scope.
Any
Do we
input?
have anything in our charter or the ordinance that prohibits someone from serving on 2 boards currently?
Yes.
Yes.
Um,
Which is inconsistently applied,
Right,
because we do have council members serving on the sewer subcommittee when this town council is the
Right.
sewer authority. So, or we have a council member on the economic development commission. So there are some boards that are allowed.
are they a voting member though, or are they just like a liaison?
Well, so the difference would be they cannot serve on the planning commission and the town council.
Right,
Because those are 2 regulatory authorities. The Economic Development Commission is advisory only. They don't vote on anything. They might vote among themselves, but they don't have
It's
an
not binding.
authority to bind anyone. or
right,
anything
because they
to it.
then bring it to
So-
council.
As an advisory basis, I wouldn't see any conflict with serving on multiple boards, Historic Preservation Commission, but maybe not the land trust, because then you're exercising financial authority over the purchase of land. So some boards, yes, some boards, no. But I wouldn't say that it's clearly articulated anywhere.
Yeah,
Years ago in state government, they passed the separation of powers, which kept any legislator from serving on any board or commission. So if you were elected representative, you could not be on the board of, we'll say, resource recovery. So is it any different than a town council person sitting on the sewer subcommittee?
I'm looking.
I think
under
it
the
depends on if
charter.
they're a voting member of the subcommittee or if they're just Because essentially that council member would have 2 votes at the table, right? Because they
Two
would
bites at the
vote,
apple, yeah.
they
Yeah.
would vote in the
Vote-
subcommittee,
yep.
and then
Vote
when
again.
it makes it up to the council level, they would be voting again.
Mhm.
So I can see where that would be a conflict.
You think that that's like that separation I mentioned? or-
Yeah, I think,
For
I
those
think
type of
that-
things, I think it should be or non-voting.
right.
How
I
many,
think
how
it's
many
important for
council
the
members are on
councilors.
this school subcommittee?
Two.
2. They're full voting members on it.
One of them is now serving as chair.
Wow, that adds a little bit more to it.
Yeah, I had never thought of it that way, but I don't think we're the only town that does that.
No.
In fact, in my last town, Springottsbury Township, Pennsylvania, the entire Board of Supervisors, which was the town council, they made themselves the Economic Development Agency too,
The whole thing?
100%.
All right.
So
How big of a community was it?
27,000. It's the largest, most affluent municipality in York County, outside of York City, which has the city problems. But I always found that interesting because it doesn't diversify the input, the opportunity to serve or make a difference, but it also didn't make any difference. And I was like, well, under what auspices are you having this meeting, and what does the redevelopment authority do anyway? They didn't have any redevelopment projects, so it was kind of largely
Ignored.
irrelevant, moot. But I've seen, there was it in Idaho and Oregon both had instances where if you had a majority of the council on the urban renewal agency, the redevelopment agency, then it would nullify any acts of the redevelopment agency based on the fact that it's just the alter ego of the town council, and you had to have a sufficient separation of authority and powers for the actions of the redevelopment agency to be legitimate. So that question of legitimacy, representation, checks and balances in government are the considerations to keep in front of mind. And when does that matter and when doesn't it matter?
I think we tried that here. Redevelopment agency, and they were making like TIF districts and trying to get away to spur, some growth and some modernization.
Tax treaties and.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
Which
Any-
again would ultimately come before the council. So if someone is on, a council member is on that committee
2 votes.
making these tax treaty agreements, and then they're voting again on it as a council member.
but it's not too different than the interest in having a town council member sitting on a collective bargaining negotiations team. They get that inside view, the familiarity, they're a little bit expert on it, and they can provide an informed voice on the council. So there are benefits to be had. It's
Yeah.
not all negative, but
No,
And I think you made a good point with the advisory versus voting.
right. Right.
There is an advisory position, and they're still bringing all that back.
Council liaison versus an appointed member of that board or commission.
What we were talking about earlier with the school committee.
Right.
So if you want to take a look at this, Laura, just take the title of it, if you want to take a look at it, that's the one about the school committee contracts. The amendment of charter thing, I think we're thinking that elected officials shouldn't be barred from it.
In general.
In general.
Yes.
Yeah. So, there's really no reason to keep people from serving on a committee. Look how long it took us to get to 9 people. And
It's like in this town, you can't sit on the planning board and the zoning board. And I don't understand
Copies?
why that
I
is.
think
but-
it's
I think just one, yeah.
Yeah,
I've seen in other communities where one of those boards is the appellate board for the other. And so.
So
that would
planning
be a
goes to
good
zoning or-
Right.
yeah.
That
Or
would
the
be
other way
the
around.
reason not to do
Oh,
that.
Right,
but-
kind
yeah.
of like
Well,
Zoning is also a
well, they're both looking at
quasi-judicial
land use
board.
issues and zoning issues, and so they're, you know, you go to the zoning board for a variance, but you go to the planning board for plan development approval. And if your plan is approved here, but then it violates the zoning ordinance,
You have to go there
you
anyway.
gotta go there anyway, so there is a separation of responsibilities, powers, and authorities.
Okay, so is there any further discussion on either of these charter issues that I brought up?
I have one question on the last one, and I'm just wondering, when I first read it, I didn't have a big problem with it all. I'm listening to everybody. But the previous charter commission, I guess this was in the ballot in 2020. There should be, is there documentation and reasoning behind how they got to this? Is there backup information? That's just like we're proposing, writing up some documentation with everything we do here, which is what we need to do.
I watched a couple of the last charter committee's meetings on video. Are they archived?
This charter.
The last charter
Oh,
commission.
I don't.
They might be on YouTube,
I saw one of them on YouTube.
because I watched some of them, but I don't think I was watching them live.
Yeah. I watched what,
Or at least, you know what, I might have. What I remember is 2 meetings that were with the town council. So they were technically town council meetings,
Mhm.
which I believe are still on.
that might have been.
They
the
were
pres-
Zoom
that might have
on
been the
YouTube.
Presentation.
Yeah,
right?
so, and what I remember vaguely was they made the presentation in July, I think it was June or July, I can't remember what. It was getting near the deadline, and the town council didn't go for pretty much anything they put forward, but came back with a lot of suggestions, like what they, and then there was a second meeting where it's like, we've come back with this idea. And that's when the ones that were approved for the ballot went forward. So at least the end part of it.
Yeah.
I believe is out there. I don't know if everything behind that was.
Yeah, the presentations, yeah.
Like the
So-
the
Yeah.
main presentation they made,
Mhm.
the feedback they got from council, and then the second presentation, which had some revisions to it.
Yeah, that'd be helpful to watch.
The other thing I did, Jim, you might want to try this, is I went on the Secretary of State's website. I went to the charter review
Find the minutes, see.
from 2020, and I read all their minutes. And
I know those-
there's discussion and there's votes. I don't know if when Ed Wazika was here, whether he cashed any of
Yep. I don't know.
any of those meetings, because they were all Zoom
Right.
for that. The whole entire thing was Zoom. So you have a new IT guy here.
Mhm.
Do you think you could ask him if any of that stuff was archived from the 2020?
Yeah, I can ask.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah, because it seems to me they wrote this up so there was no conflict. In other words, if there's anything in the charter that impacts what they're currently appointed to do or elected to do, then that's conflict.
Right.
But I think as Ben mentioned, maybe there's.
Maybe they went a little bit.
There's a few exclusions we could add here that would just benefit the commission.
Yeah.
The only provision I see in the charter that I can find so far is 1501 definitions. 1501F, no other public office is defined. And it's mostly an exception for, you can still serve in the National Guard and all these other volunteer capacities outside, but
Which one is that now?
that's where it's saying you can hold no other office, but it's just a definition of what no other public office means.
Okay.
There's nothing, you know, the closest thing is
I think we had a
charitable or educational organization to work in connection with any agency of the town, member of any board, commission, or agency formed to work alone or with other members. I mean, that gets pretty ambiguous to me.
Yeah. I can remember in the past that there was an issue with someone that was on the town council that worked for the state. But there's a state law that says that you can work, if you're a state employee, you can serve on a municipal council. But there was another one that was local that I'll have to go back and look at him. I think it happened with Ted Jensen. Ted worked for the state.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Ted worked for the state. It was challenged. The state has a law that says a state employee can work or can serve on a town council, but then there was another section to that, and I can't quite remember that, the last part of that section. Any more input? If not, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Hold on, let's skip one.
All in favor?
Right.
Hold on, hold on.
Aye.
Okay,
We didn't offer public comment to any of
Oh,
our
I'm sorry.
meetings,
Right.
so.
thank you. Is
I don't
there
want-
any
I don't wanna get
public
whacked
comment
with
out
that.
there,
Good catch.
Before you make the vote, yeah.
including all of us? Because the last time we met, I considered all of us public comment. I think we pretty much just did that anyway. So hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
We have the motion
Move
and
second.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted.
So we're gonna be here next one, right?
Next Wednesday, yeah.
Thanks, Scott.
It's gonna be
All
Wednesday.
right, thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you, Scott.